As you probably remember, in 2019, the U.S. got involved in the internal politics of Venezuela. A little background. In 2018, in an election that was clearly not legitimate, Nicolas Maduro was reelected president of Venezuela. Juan Guaido was the leader of the Conservative Party, the largest opposition party in Venezuela's legislature. At the beginning of 2019, he declared himself acting president on the grounds that Maduro had not been elected legitimately. Minutes later, the United States released a prepared statement which recognized his presidency. I mention the timing because it seems to suggest that Guaido coordinated this action with the United States. Maduro responded by labeling this an illegal coup, and he ordered Guaido arrested, although Guaido was able to keep out of the clutches of Maduro's forces. Venezuela's economy is extremely weak. This is partly, but not completely, Maduro's own fault. His government's corrupt and incompetent management of the nationalized Venezuelan oil industry wasted a tremendous amount of proceeds. Given that oil is Venezuela's main economic product, when the price of oil fell a few years ago, this further hurt Venezuela's fiscal situation, which was compounded by the fact that Maduro was unwilling or unable to reduce government spending to keep pace with the lower oil revenue. The 2 rounds of U.S. and other countries' sanctions also severely hurt Venezuela's economy. So overall, there's no doubt Maduro's rule has been bad for the Venezuelan economy. It's been damaging to the democracy, and in general has worsened the condition of Venezuela's citizens. Further, his election was illegitimate, and most Venezuelans did not and do not support his presidency. But is that why the U.S. has intervened? After all, other, more conservative Latin American governments have also threatened human rights and weakened democracy in recent years with no significant American objection. We do not have a policy, nor have we had a policy over the past 75 years of systematically opposing dictators. We have intervened because Guaido has promised to give American oil companies access to Venezuelan crude oil. Venezuela's oil reserves dwarf those of any other country in South or Latin America. In fact, Venezuela has more oil than any other single country in the world. And while most Venezuelans don't see Maduro as a legitimate president, most Venezuelans also don't view Guaido as a legitimate president, and they oppose the U.S. intervention. We immediately read this headline as absurd, and we become so used to U.S. interventions that we don't realize that to much of the world, this is exactly what it looks like when we, the United States, get mixed up in deciding who their rightful ruler is. In my own view, neither Maduro or Guaido is worthy of support, nor should the United States be attempting to decide who should head the Venezuelan government. The moral appropriate approach would be an international coalition pressuring Venezuela for truly free and fair elections. Instead, Trump kept the threat of military intervention in support of Guaido, kept that threat on the table. Many Americans, both those who like Trump and dislike him, see him as having no continuity with previous American presidents and previous American policies. But I'd argue that our intervention in Venezuela is not at all explained by the popular caricature of Trump, and very much follows in the tradition of our previous pressure on Latin America. A one-man symbol of this continuity is Elliott Abrams, who Trump reappointed, brought back into government as so-called special representative to oversee humanitarian aid to Venezuela. Abrams has some experience with humanitarian aid. As Assistant Secretary of State under President Ronald Reagan, Abrams oversaw smuggling arms to the Nicaraguan Contra rebels under the guise of shipments of humanitarian aid. Also on Abrams' resume, a 1991 conviction of lying to Congress in reference to the Iran-Contra affair. And Abrams even has experience specific to U.S. Venezuela policy. As Special Assistant to President George W. Bush, Abrams successfully pushed the Bush administration to support a 2002 coup attempt against Maduro's predecessor as president, Hugo Chavez. The coup was unsuccessful. Perhaps that helps us understand why both the Maduro regime and international agencies like the Red Cross and the UN refuse to participate in the supposed U.S. aid convoy. Even news sources perceived as being liberal or anti-Trump had picked this story up and reported it fairly uncritically. Another widely reported story of Venezuelan troops setting that aid convoy on fire has been discredited. While some figures on the left wing of the Democratic Party, like Bernie Sanders, and some on the libertarian right wing of the Republican Party, like Senator Rand Paul, while figures like that did condemn the Trump actions, Democratic leadership, while criticizing Trump in some stylistic ways, basically supported his policy and gave him backing in his attempt for regime change in Venezuela. There's kind of a silly talking point that Trump simply follows Putin's orders. But this Venezuela action does not fit into that caricature. Maduro had close ties with Russia, and deposing Maduro certainly seemed to be against Russian policy and Russian interests. Venezuela is just the latest in a long series of U.S. foreign policy interventions designed to force other weaker countries to allow the United States access to their markets, to allow capitalist countries, including the United States, access to their raw materials.
Now over there in Managua Square, with American-made bombs falling everywhere, kill women and children and animals too. These bombs are made by people like me and you, and we're told that we hold a big stick over them. But I know what I've read, that peace is in our hands. Over there in Guatemala, my friend, we're making mistakes there once again. Uncle Sam supports a fascist regime that doesn't represent the people over there. And we learn and believe there is justice for us all. And we lie to ourselves.
America. That's not even taking into account interventions, for example, in the Middle East. What ultimately happened in Venezuela, which slipped off of our front pages as the situation dragged on and on. Despite U.S. predictions that Maduro would be gone, with Maduro, who has the loyalty of the Venezuelan military, has been able to hang on. At the same time, Guaido has U.S. support, which has produced a standoff for when Venezuela asked the International Monetary Fund for a loan to deal with the issue that the whole world has been dealing with. The IMF responded that while it recognized their need and their plight, they would not even consider the request because of confusion about who was the actual recognized president of the country. Venezuela has gotten some aid in fighting COVID-19 from other sources. For the first time, the United States has offered to deal with the Maduro administration. We have offered relief from sanctions in turn for a temporary power sharing arrangement between Maduro and Guaido and their allies, which would lead up to new, presumably fair, Venezuelan elections. At the same time, we have also indicted Maduro on the charges that his government was in effect a drug dealing conspiracy. We have deployed Navy warships off the coast of Venezuela as part of some kind of anti-narcotic trafficking force. It's almost certainly true that Maduro has enriched himself at his countrymen's expense, but the Trump administration has offered no evidence for the view that the Maduro administration is involved in drug trafficking. What do we make of all this? I look forward to reading your thoughts in the discussion forum.